Hello footy fans, welcome to another massive episode of Bev's Footy Show for the season of 2017. Let's not muck around, let's get straight into having a look at the episode agenda. I'm going to start the show by looking back at the results from week 2 of the finals, the semi-finals of course. Following that is my season ratings for the two teams knocked out in finals week 2. I did this a few weeks ago for the sides that didn't make the finals. I did it last week for Essendon and Port Adelaide, who were knocked out last week. I'm doing it again for the two sides knocked out in the semi-finals. Following that is the 5 talking points of the week, and then going to get stuck into week 3 of the finals, the matches as well as my tips. Of course, the preliminary finals, it's going to be a massive weekend to decide who will play off in the 2017 AFL Grand Final. And then to finish off the show, I'm going to have a look at the Brownlow Medal. I'm going to give a preview of the Brownlow Medal, which is coming up on Monday night. I'm going to give you the information for it, what time it starts, where you can watch it, and I'm also going to give you the top 5 chances as well as my tip for the 2017 Brownlow Medal. So can't wait for that. But in the meantime, let's now have a look back at the results from week 2 of the finals, the semi-finals. Week 2 of the finals all began on Friday night with the second semi-final at the MCG between Geelong and the Sydney Swans. Of course, the Cats coming in to this game off the back of a real heavy and disappointing loss in the qualifying final in week 1 of the finals against Richmond, where they didn't score for three quarters of the first half. And so this was their second chance. And as for the Sydney Swans, who finished 6th on the ladder, put themselves through to elimination final against Essendon and actually beat the Bombers pretty comfortably at the SCG to put themselves through to this particular final against the Cats. The Swans, fair to say, were strong favourites coming into this game. A lot of people giving them a real big chance to win this game and probably riding off the Cats, and rightly so, because they were very disappointing in week 1 of the finals. And as for the Swans, they've been really sensational since that 06 start. So it was rightly so that the Swans were favourites, I thought, but it didn't turn out that way. In fact, the Cats, it was kind of a close first quarter, but then the Cats put really big damage on the Swans in the second quarter, and from that moment really ran away with the game and kept the Swans to a real surprisingly low score, and yeah, ran out convincing winners, which was very surprising. The final score, Geelong 15-8-98 defeated the Sydney Swans 5-9-39. As I said, low score. That is a very low score from a Swans point of view, and this game was played in front of 55,529 at the MCG. So it's a bit of a shock to see the Sydney Swans out, because you know, we know that they've had a very good second half to the season. They've been the most informed side of the competition, but then suddenly they come to the MCG and bang, Geelong respond in you know, really big fashion, and congratulations to them, because like I said, a lot of people in Australia are writing them off. So to come out and put up and put in that display, I should say, against the Swans, who, as I said, informed side of the competition, it's just great, and it does their chances really good wonders for next week. Of course, they're through to a preliminary final against the Adelaide Crows, and I reckon they're a chance to beat the Crows over there. You'll see a bit later on whether I tip them, whether I tip the Cats or not. Patrick Dangerfield was put to full forward and kicked 4 goals, 3 in the match. It was a really good move. Of course, Tom Lonergan was a late withdrawal with I think food poisoning, sausage roll before the game, or at some stage before the game, maybe a day before the game. I'm not sure how much truth there is to that, but Yeah, I don't know why you'd be eating a sausage roll a couple of days before the game. That doesn't sound like a very good diet for a footballer. But anyway, we'll move on to the next game. Congratulations to the Cats. A real responsive and fantastic win. And that's why teams such as Geelong get the second chance because, well, they deserve it and they've proved that. The first semi-final was on Saturday night at Spotless Stadium between the Giants and the Eagles. This was a disappointing game, to be honest. I really expected the Eagles. I thought they would take it up to the Giants. I thought it would be a tighter game than what it was. But the Giants just smashed the Eagles. And yeah, the West Coast Eagles just put in an absolute woeful display. And as a result, the Giants won 19-11, 125, defeating the West Coast Eagles 9-4-58 in front of 14,865 at Spotless Stadium, which is in fact the lowest crowd for a final since the 1916 semi-final. That's a very, very long time ago, nearly 100, well, over 100 years ago now. So that is unreal, and I'll talk more about that in the 5 talking points of the week. But yeah, look, Stevie J come out and responded well. Of course, he was dropped for the game against the Adelaide Crows, but come back into this side and kicked 6 goals, so he was impressive. Yeah, the Giants were very impressive on Saturday night, and the Eagles were quite poor. And you'll hear my thoughts on their season very shortly in the season ratings for them in 2017. But yeah, a very woeful game from them, and I guess maybe the extra time took a little bit of a toll. I don't know, but I think probably the main reason is clearly they weren't really good enough on the night, and the Giants were just far too strong. So as like Geelong, they made use of the double chance as well by getting a good win over the Eagles at Spotless Stadium. Of course, the Giants' home ground. So that is the semi-final results. On now to my season ratings for the Eagles and the Swans. Okay, on now to my season ratings for the 2 teams knocked out in Week 2 of the finals, being the Sydney Swans and the West Coast Eagles. Let's get straight into it. I'll start with the Sydney Swans, who finished higher than the Eagles. 14 wins and 8 losses for them this season, plus 1 win in the finals. Not better than last year. Of course, last year they finished first on the ladder with 17 wins, 5 losses, plus 2 finals wins, and of course made the grand final. But of course went on to lose that grand final. So it's fair to say they haven't had a better year than last year, but they still made the finals, and considering their poor start, they did very, very well to make the finals, in my view. 0-6 and then, you know, to make the finals. No team has ever done that until now, so that is a fantastic effort for them. They had some young developments in the season, which was pretty pleasing. But Kurt Tippett remains a little bit of an unknown for me, because he hasn't quite lived up to his salary cap and his contract, I guess, implications and what, there's probably another word for it, maybe, I guess, contract expectations maybe. I guess his salary cap, you know, his salary cap suggests that he needs to be a really, really good player, and he hasn't lived up to that at all. So whether they consider trading him or offloading him, so you know, they can maybe get, you know, maybe afford other players who are going to do the job for them, because they clearly need to improve some you know, certain areas of their game to, of course, try and go a bit more higher next year. I've given them a 7 out of 10, which is, I think, a bit kind, because obviously last year they had a better year and they probably just slipped under the blanket a little bit, especially in the early part of the stage this season. But like I said, did well to make the finals considering their start, and you know, making the finals I think is a pass in itself. So I think 7 out of 10 is a pretty good reflection on their season, and I think it's a fair one as well. So the Sydney Swans, a 7 out of 10 for me. Of course, if you disagree with any of my ratings or want to share your opinion, then just comment down below. I'm happy to hear everyone's opinion. Everyone has a right to disagree and agree with me and have their own opinion. I'm all for that. Let's move on to the West Coast Eagles now, who is an interesting one. 12 wins, 10 losses, 1 win in finals. Arguably a better year than last year. But however, in 2016 they finished 6th with 16 wins and 6 losses. but they lost a final last year. They lost that elimination final to the Dogs. So it's arguably a better year this year because they won a final, so that's what I'm kind of basing it on. But you could arguably say that this year hasn't been a better season for them because they finished lower on the ladder, but they still had an elimination final this year as to last year. And so you could say that this year's been a better year because they won an elimination final instead of last year. So you get the drift of what I'm trying to say. But look, I give them a 6 out of 10. I don't think they have... I don't think they've been a great side this year. In fact, they were lucky to make the finals, in my view. They probably, this is going to be harsh, but they probably didn't deserve to be there. You know, they lost to Richmond, Hawthorn, both of them at the MCG, Essendon at Etihad, Giants at Domain, Melbourne at Domain, Port Adelaide at Domain, Collingwood at Etihad, St Kilda at Etihad, Giants both times at Spotless Stadium. 7 of 11 of them are away from home, and in fact most of them are in Melbourne, and a couple of them are at the MCG. So they still haven't started winning at the MCG, which is a real concern. And you know, I know that they travel a fair bit. It's a 3-hour flight to you know, from Perth to Melbourne, but they need to get used to that, and they need to be able to, you know, win at games away from home. I think they have a good record at Domain. They have lost a couple there this year, though, which is a little bit unexpected. But they have a good home. They have a good home advantage, I think. But they haven't really done what they need to do away from home. The consistency has been a problem all year, and that's why I give them a 6 out of 10. They just haven't been consistent. Like, I expected them to beat sides such as Hawthorn, who were, you know, going very badly at the start of the season, and they didn't beat them in round 5. I would have expected them to beat maybe the Bombers, although the Bombers did improve this season. You know, Melbourne in Domain, I would have expected them to win possibly every game at Domain, excluding a few. Collingwood at Etihad, I think that was a terrible loss, and that just shows their inconsistency this season. So, you know, they need to start winning away from home. That's something they need to do next season, and they also need to think about bringing in some more midfielders, because they're going to lose Priddis and Mitchell, who have been a real core of their midfield this season. So a 6 out of 10 I think is a fair reflection. I give them a pass. I was actually thinking of giving them a 5 out of 10, but they made the finals and had a win in the finals, so you have to give them a 6 out of 10. I reckon that's a fair judgment. So that is my season ratings for the two sides knocked out in finals week 2, being the Sydney Swans and the West Coast Eagles. Time now for one of my favourite segments on this show. It is the 5 talking points of the week. Let's not muck around. Let's get straight into the first talking point. And the first talking point is Patrick Dangerfield as a forward. This comes on the back of his sensational display on Friday night against the Swans. He kicked 4 goals, 3 thanks to Chris Scott, who sent him to that full forward or forward line position where he made his presence felt from a Swans and spectator point of view. It was fantastic to watch, and the question now for Chris Scott is whether to play him on Friday night in that forward line position, in the forward line. If I was Chris Scott, I probably would, because it worked on Friday night, and it really got them off to a really good start. And they needed a good start because, you know, that game on in week 1 of the finals was poor against Richmond. So they needed that head start, and they needed something in the forward line, especially, you know, not scoring until late in the second half in the qualifier against Richmond. They needed something up forward to get them a few early goals. So, you know, if I was Chris Scott, I'd probably put Patrick Dangerfield in the forward line in the first quarter, and so, you know, Geelong can get a few early goals and maybe get off to a head start, which is something they'll be aiming to do. Let's not forget, though, he is one of the best on-ballers in the competition, and that's his predominant and his dominating position. And even though he's really showed his strength in the forward line, he is an on-baller as well, and that's where he's, you know, that's how he's won his Brownlows and so forth. I shouldn't say Brownlows, he's won Brownlow. That's how he's won it, and that's how he's made a name of himself, because he's been just sensational through that midfield. So I reckon he'll play a lot of time in the midfield, but I'm sure Chris Scott will put him into the forward line in various stages of the game, including the first quarter. I reckon that has to happen, I reckon. Second talking point, the Lance Franklin deal is a fail so far. I can't believe what I've heard in the media since the game on Friday night. I think it's ridiculous, this discussion on whether the Lance Franklin deal is a fail or not. It's one of the best deals that the Swans ever done. Like, honestly, let's face it, he's brought members to that club. He has brought people to the game in Sydney. And let's not forget his achievements at the club since his time there. Yes, he hasn't won a grand final, but it's not a one-man club. There are other players in that team that make the team. It is not a one-person team. And just because they haven't won a grand final since Buddy Franklin arrived, doesn't mean he should be blamed for that. It is just ridiculous. Like, what the hell? What the hell? That's all I can really say, to be honest. But let's just go through some of the things here. Lance Franklin made his debut in 2014. Won the this is while he's been at Sydney. He won the Coleman Medal in 2014-17. So that's 2 Coleman Medals since he's been at the club. 3 All-Australian awards since he's been at the club. 2014 in his first year that he was at the Swans. 2016 and 2017. A part of a grand final side in 2014-16. Which of course losing grand finals, and he's been the leading goal kicker every year he's been there, 14, 15, 16 and 17. Yes, he hasn't really performed in big games, but that's something he needs to improve on. But then again, like I say, it's not a one-person team, and it shouldn't just be relied on one particular person to get them to a grand final, get the Swans to a grand final. You know, he had a bad game on Friday night against the Cats. He's had a couple that have been bad, but it's not a failed deal. And look, I expressed this on the Bev show on Sunday night, and I'm expressing it again on this show because I think it's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. And look, I'm all for that everyone's entitled to an opinion, but I reckon some of those journos out there need to pull their heads in and have a good think about what they're actually writing, because this particular opinion is quite vague and quite ridiculous, to be honest. You have to look at the facts before you develop a real good opinion, and you know, the opinion that the Lance Franklin deal was a fail is just a uneducated and unknowledgeable opinion. Number 3, the crowd at Spotless Stadium on Saturday night. As I mentioned before, the lowest crowd for a final since the 1916 semi-final. I said on the Bev show on Sunday night that it was a pretty poor crowd. Let's be honest, it was a low crowd and a poor crowd. But we in this game in the AFL have these expectations that the crowds need to be high, especially in the finals, and rightly so, because they're especially the finals. They're the marquee games, and they're the games that, you know, should be gaining a lot of interest and gaining a very big, high amount of attendances. But are these expectations too high for the GWS Giants, who, you know, they're an expansion club, who they're in their 6th year, I think. They began in 2012, and I think they're in their sixth year off memory. And are we being too critical on a side who probably doesn't have doesn't have a large supporter base? You know, they were never going to get a big crowd there on Saturday night. They were never going to pack it out. Western Sydney's kind of that suburb where they're still building the AFL as a code and as an interest there in the suburb, in that particular region, and it's still a work in progress. And you know, the Eagles and GWS Giants, you know, it's probably not the most two interesting clubs in the AFL. So yeah, no, look, I think, of course, it was a poor crowd, but we have to kind of we kind of have to lower the expectations a little bit for the Giants, because they're an expansion club and they're still growing, and they're not going to get that many people to a final with the state they're at the moment, I suppose, or the supporter base they're at the moment. Maybe they need a grand final to raise the supporter base, but it's going to take some time to get people on board and behind this club. Yeah, it was a poor crowd, but what can you do? It's an expansion club. Fourth talking point, Stevie J's comeback. It was a sensational comeback, 6 goals on the weekend. He had a sensational game. He'll probably be in the side against Richmond on Saturday night. If he gets dropped, then that's just one of the worst calls, I reckon. But that won't happen. He kicked 6 goals. He really responded well, and good on him because you know, he probably should have stayed in the side against the Crows. But then again, he was in bad form. And yeah, to come back in the side and do that, I think is fantastic. And yeah, he'll be needed again. He'll need to do that again on Saturday night against the Tigers because they're not going to be easy to beat. Final talking point is Josh Kelly's re-signing. Of course, a big hit to clubs such as North Melbourne and St Kilda who are looking to get him because Josh Kelly has re-signed for 2 years with the GWS Giants. And is it loyal of him to stay there? I think it is. He's not only stayed loyal to the Giants, he's also identified that that's where he wants to be for the next 2 years. He's identified that club as his home, and 2 years is a pretty good length contract because, you know, he obviously feels like they're in a premiership window. I feel like they're in a premiership window. If they don't win it this year, they can win it the next year and the year after. And then obviously he may feel like after that period of time, and when that time's up, he might want to go back to Victoria. But at the moment, he feels like something is really brewing and really happening at the Giants, and so he stayed loyal to them. You know, cut the money aside, put all the big offers aside, and stayed loyal to the Giants. And you know, hopefully for him, it will pay off, and they'll win a premiership, and he'll be a premiership player. He's a good player, and the Giants have done very well to keep him. And as for North Melbourne, they've missed out on Dustin Martin and Josh Kelly in this I guess free agent window, and that's a big loss to them, no doubt about that. And same with the Saints as well. And I think there was maybe another club looking for Kelly as well. But yeah, he's probably done the right thing in his own mind, and that is stay at the Giants. Time now to have a look at the matches and tips for preliminary final weekend, week 3 of the finals. Let's get straight in with the first preliminary final on Friday the 22nd of September at 7:20 PM local, 7:50 PM Eastern. It is the Adelaide Crows and Geelong, the top of the table clash, you could say, because the Crows finished first, the Cats finished second. This one being played at Adelaide Oval. You can watch it on 7 and Fox Footy. This is going to be a really good game. And like I said before, I reckon the Cats can take it up to the Crows. I was going to tip the Cats, but I'm going to stick with the Crows. I'm going to stick with the favourites. They're in good form. They'll be hard to beat over there. They did beat the Cats the last time they met over in Adelaide Oval. I think they'll do it again, and they'll put themselves through to a grand final, the first for such a long time for the Adelaide Crows. So yeah, I'm tipping the Crows, but I think it'll be a good game. Wouldn't be surprised if the Cats make a game for it and maybe even win. Of course, the last 2 years, the sides who have lost, one side who has lost the qualifier has went on to make the grand final. That of course being Hawthorn in 2015, and in fact they won it that year. And of course last year the Sydney Swans, who of course didn't win it, but yeah, lost to the Giants in the first week and then went on to make the grand final. But anyway, the second preliminary final is on Saturday the 23rd of September. It's a twilight fixture, 4:45 PM, a bit of a tongue twister there. I'll say that again, 4:45 PM. Richmond and GWS Giants at the MCG. You can watch it on 7 and Fox Footy. This should be a good game, I would say, but the Tigers should win for me, although the Giants, really good game from them on Saturday night in week 2 of the finals. But yeah, I think the Tigers are ready. They'll be refreshed, they'll be ready to go, and they'll be their supporters will be cheering them, and they'll be able to win, I think. Considering that they won against the Giants the last time they met, which was at the MCG, and they did it in convincing fashion. So that is the matches and my tips for week 3 of the finals. Cannot wait. And to finish off the show, just a quick Brownlow Medal preview. Of course, the next episode of this show won't be uploaded until mid-next week, so that means I have to preview the Brownlow Medal now. So, of course, the 2017 AFL Brownlow Medal will be held Monday the 25th of September in Grand Final week at 8 PM at Crown. You can watch it on 7. I don't think Fox Footy are doing it this year, so I think the only place to watch it is Channel 7. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I couldn't find the Brownlow Medal listed in the Fox Footy Guide, so I'm assuming that 7 only have the rights to it, and it probably makes sense because they've just recently signed a TV agreement for the next few years. Of course, that was signed last year. But anyway, having a look at my top 5 chances, I've put together a little bit of a list of players I expect to be there in definitely the top 10, but probably the top 5. Dustin Martin's the big favourite, of course, and he'll probably win it, to be honest. Tom Mitchell, though, is probably the next best in my opinion. This is, by the way, not in order, but Tom Mitchell, I would say, is probably the next best because he's had very, very good disposal games, and because it's kind of a midfield-based award, he could be up there, but who knows? Some umpires, I'd say, would vote on goal kickers, so you might see a forward or two up there in the leaderboard. You've got Josh Kelly from the Giants. He'll be a chance to crack the top 5. I reckon he's definitely a top 5 chance. Rory Sloane's another one, and also Josh Kennedy, who's had a fantastic year for the Swans. I'm tipping Dustin Martin. I can't go past him from Richmond. He's had a good year. You know, with all the contract talks, he played some of the best footy we've seen from him, and yeah, because of that, I think he'll win the Brownlow. We saw just last week he smashed the MVP award. I think the umpires will be thinking the same as the players. I reckon Dustin Martin should win the 2017 Brownlow Medal from my point of view. So that's a preview of the Brownlow Medal. Cannot wait. It's a great start to what is going to be a fantastic grand final week next week. And that is it for this week's episode of Bev's Footy Show. Thank you very much for watching. Of course, don't forget to like, comment and share this video. Also, keep up to date for a special grand final edition of Bev's Footy Show next week, where I'll preview the big one. Cannot wait for that. Of course, don't forget to also follow facebook.com/thebevshow. It's my weekly live stream, and yeah, it's where I talk not only AFL but other sports as well. So make sure you go check that out. Once again, facebook.com/thebevshow. Enjoy preliminary final week. I'll be back next week with, like I said, a special grand final edition of Bev's Footy Show. But until then, bye for now.